Terror at the Smelters. The island of Sodor is a wonderful place, surrounded by sandy beaches, cozy villages, forests full of trees, and lots of railway lines. The island of Sodor is a place for people and engines to work hard and enjoy themselves. But every engine's nightmare is to work at a dangerous place where they sometimes meet their fate. A place that every engine wants to avoid. This place is known as the Smelters Yard. Mountains of scrapped engines pile up alongside the tracks, and because of this, many of the engines find the place very spooky, especially when showers of sparks light up inside the smelting shed. The smelter's yard is run by two sinister diesel engines, Ari and Bert. They shunt freight cars of scrap metal into trains either to be scrapped or taken away to other scrap yards across the island. But recently, the workload was becoming more than the diesels could handle, so Sir Topham Hatt decided to have another engine help out. One day he arrived at Tidmouth Sheds to see Thomas. "Thomas, I want you to help out at the smelter's yard for a few days. Ari and Bert are working very hard, but they could use another engine to help out with the shunting. Duck will take care of your branch line while you're gone." "Yes, sir," said Thomas nervously. He didn't want to work at the smelter's yard. He remembered the time when he thought he was being chased by the ghost engine after he kept teasing Percy for being a scaredy engine. But he didn't want to disappoint Sir Topham Hatt, so he set off at once. When Thomas arrived at the smelter's yard, the yard manager was waiting for him. "Thank goodness you came," he said. "Ari and Bert have been working their wheels off all day, and they need your help." "Right away, sir," said Thomas, and he set off to begin his shunting. For the next few days, Thomas worked very hard and tried to keep his distance from Ari and Bert, who weren't too pleased to have him helping out at the smelter's yard. At the end of the last day, the job was nearly complete. "Well done," said the yard manager. "Now, Thomas, I just need you to finish up in the smelting shed, and then you can head back to Tidmouth." "All right, sir," said Thomas. He was happy the job would soon be over. Inside the smelting shed, Thomas tried to focus on his work and distract himself from the sounds of machines whirring and chains clanking. But he was starting to become spooked. Finally, the last train was ready, and Ari and Bert took it away to be delivered to another scrapyard on the island. Thomas felt very relieved, and he couldn't wait to have a rest at Tidmouth Sheds. Then there was trouble. No matter how hard they tried, none of the workmen could open the smelting shed doors. Something had jammed. Thomas waited and waited, but the doors wouldn't move. "Come on," he peeped impatiently. "What's the hold-up?" "Sorry, Thomas," said a workman. "The doors seem to be stuck. It's too late to fix them now. You'll have to wait here until the doors are fixed in the morning." "Bother," grumbled Thomas, but secretly he was a little scared. His crew parked him in a siding and left to go home. Thomas was now all alone in the smelting shed. He glanced around nervously at the endless rows of rusted machinery and pieces of scrap that hung over the tracks. Although he knew that Sir Topham Hatt would never scrap his engines, the thought of being scrapped and joining the engines who lost their souls long ago chilled him to the boiler. Meanwhile, the other engines were at Tidmouth Sheds. They were all getting ready for a good night's sleep. All the engines except Percy. "Where's Thomas?" he asked. "He hasn't come back to the sheds." "I heard from Sir Topham Hatt that he was delayed at the smelter's yard," replied Henry. "He should be back at the sheds tomorrow." "I hope he's all right," said Percy. "The smelter's yard is a really scary place." Eagle felt sorry for Percy. "If it makes you feel any better," he said, "I'll go to the smelter's yard tonight to check on Thomas." "Oh, thank you, Eagle," said Percy. He was very grateful to have a friend like Eagle. Back at the smelter's yard, Thomas was trying his hardest to fall asleep, but he was too distracted by the sounds and shadows all around him. Must be brave, he thought to himself. Suddenly, a giant whoosh of sparks lit up the shed. "Bust my buffers!" cried Thomas. He was very scared. Then there was a loud bang as a scrapped car nearby exploded and was quickly engulfed in flames. Then there was another loud bang as the truck next to it exploded as well. The fire quickly spread to lots of other vehicles in the shed, and soon there was a raging inferno. Thomas was horrified. "Cinders and ashes!" he cried. He tried to move, but he couldn't without his driver and fireman. He tried to blow his whistle, but he couldn't do that either. Worse still, the doors were still stuck, and they wouldn't be fixed until the morning. Thomas was trapped. Meanwhile, Eagle was puffing down the track towards the smelter's yard. He knew what it was like to work there, and he wanted to see if Thomas was all right. Suddenly, he heard a noise that made his boiler run cold. "What was that?" he cried. Then he saw a huge fireball in the distance. Fearing the worst, he raced off as fast as he could to the source of the fire. He arrived at the smelter's yard to a horrifying sight. The smelting shed was engulfed in flames, and there were explosions everywhere. "Oh my goodness!" cried Eagle in horror. Then he heard a voice he knew all too well. "Help! Thomas!" Eagle charged towards the smelting shed and tried to bash down the doors, but they wouldn't budge. Inside the shed, Thomas was surrounded by fire and smoke. He was more frightened than he'd ever been before, but he knew that there was nothing he could do to save himself. As the explosions continued, Eagle was worn out from repeatedly trying to bash down the doors, and he wanted to have a rest. But knowing that his friend Thomas was trapped inside the shed made Eagle more determined to save him. He backed up to make one last charge at the doors. "I'm coming, Thomas!" he yelled. Eagle raced and roared faster and faster towards the shed. There was a mighty biff, and the doors broke right off their hinges. Eagle rolled bravely into the shed, just as it was starting to collapse. Thomas was very relieved to see his friend. "Eagle, save me!" he pleaded as Eagle buffered up to him. "Don't worry, Thomas. I've got you," replied Eagle. "Let's get out of here!" And Eagle began pulling Thomas out of the burning shed. Pieces of flaming scrap fell onto the tracks, but Eagle didn't give up and pushed the scrap out of the way. At last, with one mighty heave, Eagle pulled Thomas out of the flaming shed. They were just in time, as with one final explosion, the smelting shed crashed to the ground. Thomas had never felt more grateful in his life. "Thank you, Eagle," he said. "You're welcome, Thomas," replied Eagle. Then suddenly there was a loud crack. Eagle's safety valve had burst. Eagle was a very helpful engine, but breaking down the doors of the smelting shed and rescuing Thomas had been too much for him. Now he couldn't move. "Don't worry, Eagle," said Thomas assuringly. "I'll take you back to Tidmouth Sheds. It's the least I can do after you just saved me from scrap," he added, and Thomas pushed Eagle towards the safety of Tidmouth Sheds. Meanwhile, the other engines were resting in the sheds. They were still worried about Thomas. Then they all heard a familiar whistle. "It's Thomas!" cried Percy. All the engines whistled and cheered as Thomas and Eagle returned triumphantly to Tidmouth Sheds. Sir Topham Hatt was there too. He'd heard about what happened at the smelter's yard and was very pleased to see that Thomas was safe and sound. "We're all very happy to see you, Thomas," he said. "Are you feeling all right?" "I am, sir, thanks to Eagle," replied Thomas. "Well done, Eagle," boomed Sir Topham Hatt. "You are a really brave and useful engine. As a reward, you shall be repainted at the works." "Thank you, sir," replied Eagle happily. He was happy to be one of Sir Topham Hatt's engines, and Thomas was happy to have Eagle as a great friend.